Welcome to the Schools Out podcast. I am one of your hosts, Philip Mott. I'm an unschooling dad living in the Midwest with my family. We have an 8 and a 6 and a 4-year-old, almost 4-year-old. And sitting next to me is Hamilton Carter. Hamilton, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Hamilton Carter. We're out in the San Francisco Bay Area. We got all caught up a week and a half ago. We're now 11, 9, and 7, the kids here. And we're an unschooling family and have a lot of fun with it.
So what is your family up to lately? Give us a quick recap or update on just what's everybody doing?
Oh gosh. Well, we the kids have been planning a trip to Maine, and it turned out it would take us 5 days to drive there, so that was out for the moment. This morning we hiked up to our water tower, and the moon was over the ocean, and so we could see the moon over the ocean way out over the Pacific, and so that was kind of cool. And we're hatching a scheme to get up to our campsite. So it's a 4-mile hike. The cases aren't coming down quite as quickly as we'd like, but it's a 4-mile hike to the ferry terminal, and the ferry we can ride on the outside. So we're going to declare that safe for us. And then there's a bus that picks up across the bay and takes us to our campground. And the cases over there in that county are almost down to our safe limit. And so that's been the other thing that we're kind of just like chomping at the bit, ready to go, because we're all getting a little bit cabin fever, just hanging out at the house and hanging out at the park that's about a block down. So we're getting ready to head out again. What have you guys been up to?
Yeah, and I just want to mention, like, sometimes it's easy to forget in our conversations that you live in San Francisco, which I just looked up is 870,000 plus population.
Yeah.
I live in a town called Westfield, which is 30,000 population. So the congestion, cities have always been hotspots for diseases. And so the importance of your family being vigilant is far different than the importance of us being vigilant. Not that we shouldn't care at all, but it's just the congestion just isn't there for us.
Yeah, no, totally.
In any way that it is for you. So let's see, what have we been the kids have been really into drawing and coloring lately, and I think you might have seen it. I posted on Twitter. I just walked into my son's room, and they use his room as kind of their coloring station a lot. And so there's just like this pile of colored pictures, some of them half colored, some of them are traced drawings, some of them are printed coloring pages that are filled in. And I just kept thinking about how, like, the image that popped into my mind was like a kid, like a high school kid who really loves math and algebra, and and they would love, like, just give me more algebra worksheets. I love this stuff. And the teacher would still probably be like, no, we finished, binomials.
We're done with that. Yeah.
And we're moving on. And what I love about unschooling is that if they were into math, then they could go as deep as they wanted into math. If they were into literature, they could go as deep as they wanted into literature. But in a school setting, it doesn't matter how important the topic is, you can't go deep. You just cover like what is in front of you, and you move on. And that it was just such a powerful example of that, where they're learning the process of mastering certain strokes with the markers and things like that. And that may not mean that they're going to be artists, but it still has value. Things aren't valued just because you can one day make money with them. Like,
yeah,
there's value in that process of just learning how to do something until you're done with it.
Yeah, and everything winds that. Well, I found everything winds up being valuable at some point, no matter what.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm taking some extra time, some of my leisure time, I'm investing some time into doing something that I've always wanted to learn more about, which is piano. So
Oh, cool.
I play guitar and drums, and I've played those for two decades now. But I've always wanted to learn and practice piano, and I just started to invest time into it again. And really, I have a cheap little keyboard that I just teaching myself like to play the kinds of songs that I want to be able to play. So that's my own little unschooling project right now.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Now we have a guy that lives behind us that every Saturday, I assume it's a person who lives behind us. That every Saturday, all the houses here are organized where their backyards all face each other, and the houses all touch. But yeah, every Saturday he's got his back door open and it's just going to town on the piano, and it's so cool.
That's cool. None of that is a great segue to our topic today, but we're
a very quiet place.
We're gonna press forward. We're talking about Hamilton titled this topic "The Vocabulary of Oppression," which seems very daunting to me. So launch us into this topic, and hopefully we can learn some.
It was a daunting
from each other.
and probably an overly well, I don't know, actually in my experience, if it was only based on my experience, it would be overly melodramatic. But yeah, it was talking more about talking about traditional schooling. And what happened is the 9-year-old here is learning how to read and got a hold of a copy of Mr. Wolf's class and was reading it with my partner. And all of a sudden, my partner, who was also homeschooled until the last 2 years of her school, until her junior and senior year of high school, found herself having to be, the kid's like, well, what is recess? And she's like, well, that's twice a day, maybe you get out and you get to run around for 20 minutes in this fenced off yard. And then you're back in, and he's like, whoa. And the other thing that came up was a kid in the book said, you cut me, and even the teacher was confused, and it turned out what the kid meant was you cut in line in front of me. And the kid reading here is, he has to stand in line when we go do things, but he's like, why, what on earth are they even talking about? And that was a big thing. When my partner went to school too, was even in junior, senior year of high school, they were like lining up to go places, and she'd been out and about, her whole life, and she's like, what, we're going over there, right? Yes, form a line. And she's just like, okay. And so yeah, it had never occurred to me. I went to traditional school the whole 12 years of my childhood, and then when I got to college, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so nice. But it had never occurred to me that if you've never seen this stuff, it looks really, really weird and maybe artificial, and so yeah, it just kind of tickled me, and I thought it would be a fun thing to talk about.
Yeah, the concept I think that comes to mind that I think we're talking about is, in our culture, we would call a lot of these things that happen in school microaggressions. And they have this air of oppression to them, but in everyday conversation, we wouldn't normally refer to them as oppressive. But in unschooling circles, we do talk about them in that way, I think.
Yeah. Well, because I think it's because it's so much, you just don't see these things, and well, we don't anyway, in unschooling communities. And like the worst we ever see in regards to this kind of thing is people asking the kids, why aren't you at school? Or I've had to explain to people, they've been like, why is that kid here? And I'm like, well, because otherwise he'd be locked in a building. They've been like, oh my God, what do you mean? I'm like, well, they lock them all in a building. Yeah. What are you talking about? I'm talking about school. And they're like, I don't have,
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think the microaggressions is a bridge to the oppression conversation, because I think what you've pointed out is that we take for granted, or we've become desensitized to the unpleasantness of school. So it's like the person you were talking to didn't connect the dots about how school is structured much more like our understanding of how prison is structured, much more so than it's structured like, say, a library.
Yeah.
And now some people would argue and say, well, it's not actually structured like a prison. Prison actually isn't like that, like the way we view it. But regardless, it's the school is structured more like we imagine prison being structured than it is structured like a library, which I would say that it needs to be structured more like a library, where there's a ton of resources and there are people that help you find what you're looking for, instead of there's an assembly line of things that every person has to do. Because whether I'm correct in understanding the way that prison really works or not, that's the way that I imagine prison works, and that's what school is like to me. Now, some would argue that prison is actually more free than school is. I've seen that argument made. That's like, oh, I could study whatever I wanted to when I was in prison.
Oh God. Actually, I went to grad school at Texas A&M, and our English teacher for a grad student writing class told us the most horrible thing, which is that a women's prison in Texas, they had actually decided that writing was a privilege, and they had just like pulled, they in fact couldn't study. When she went to the prison to teach, they were given paper, and pencils, which was considered a privilege, and they could write while she was there. And that was it. But no, I yeah. I see the point you're making, and this is actually schools like that too, right? You got to do what you got to do when you're supposed to be doing it. Yeah.
So one of our kids, one of the things that we've talked about school is that, from our experience, we told the kids that if they went to school, they would have to get permission to use the bathroom instead of being able to use it whenever they wanted. And sometimes the teacher would actually not give the permission, so they would have to hold it at certain times. And that remains to this day the reason that they don't want to go to school.
What's a good reason?
That is enough. And some people might scoff at the idea that is any sort of an oppressive act, but I don't know, when you really think about it, like, it's such an infringement on someone's body that, I mean, children aren't incredibly great at controlling their bowels anyway. And so to create a system that does not even trust kids with this most basic human, I don't necessarily want to call it a right, but this human feeling of like, I think I need to pee. Like, we're saying you can't trust that. You need to will yourself through that.
Well, yeah. And then it's a fixed population, right? So I mean, that's the other thing that kind of occurred to me after a while, is everything is incredibly high stakes, because you've got these artificially limited resources. You're in there with these 30 people. If teacher says you can't go and you mess up, oh shit, no pun intended. But that's it, right? For 2-3 years, maybe forever, you're the kid that peed in class, and because the teacher made an arbitrary decision when you arbitrarily needed to go use the bathroom. Which is kind of nuts if you think about it.
Now, I can speak from the other side of that perspective. When I was a teacher, I mean, it was massively distracting, and all of us teachers were worried that the kids would abuse that privilege to just use the restroom whenever they wanted. And I don't actually know how a teacher should or a school should approach that. Ideally, the kids would just be allowed to use the restroom whenever they want. And from an unschooling perspective, I would say, look, if they are faking going, if they dislike your class so much that they are faking using the restroom, like you have bigger problems than
Yeah.
them pretending to need to pee.
True. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not sure anybody knows what would happen. Maybe Sudbury schools know what would, well, they don't lecture either though.
No.
So yeah, I've got not a clue what would happen if we actually let people do that. Um,
I mean,
I get,
I
I
think
mean,
we took restroom breaks 3 times a day, which
all right,
was, I mean, it's plenty. Everyone that's in third grade can do fine. Um, and that was enough. That was enough. I hardly ever had kids ask to go to the restroom, but if they did ask, I let them.
cool. Well,
But the
yeah, you've been on
fact,
both sides of this, right?
yeah,
Huh.
yes, I taught in the public school, and so um, having some of those structures in place, and like, I think is good. It's not like it's not like you could only go to the restroom by yourself, and um, and that you had to wait, until your teacher would let you. I mean, we took several bathroom breaks, and we left the classroom fairly often. So we took a bathroom break before lunch. We took a bathroom break after like our first kind of period. We took a bathroom break after. Uh, Sometimes it was after lunch or after like recess, which was after lunch. So we definitely took plenty of bathroom breaks. They had plenty of opportunities, but it still doesn't sit well with me that if a kid felt like they needed to pee, that if it was like a really nice kid or a really like meek and mild kid, that they would try to force themselves to hold it through and hold it in order to not mess with my day. Like that
Okay.
doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, that's a bummer. Yeah.
Because you probably have even kids in your own family who you have one who wants to appease dad more than the others do.
Maybe. Well, yes. More the operative word being more than. But
Yeah,
yeah.
and we have one of those too. It's like one of them just seems to want to go along with whatever I say. So if I was more strict and like you can only use the bathroom at certain times, there would be kids in my classroom who would go out of their way to make sure that they didn't bother me. While there were other kids that, like, as soon as I said you can't go to the bathroom, they're like, it's an emergency. Like, they sort of go the opposite way.
Right.
So let's see if we can kind of corral this topic a little bit, because I'm not. It's sort of an amorphous blob right now. Like, where is this conversation really going? So think about, which is good. I love that kind of meandering conversation. But think about what are some of your thoughts in terms of Mr. Wolf's class, the experience that your family had with that. What are some things that you are thinking through as you kind of like carry that topic forward?
Oh man. For me, lots of things, and I think I might even be unique within the house on thinking these kinds of things. But it just for me, it sets up like such a power structure that I don't see without it. So to me, like there was recess and you're allowed or not. Oh, at one point in the book, Mr. Ross, like, you owe me a minute. And what that meant was you owe me a minute of recess.
Mhm.
When I was in public school, it was you owe me a minute at the end of the day. So everybody
Mhm.
else would be lined up to get the hell out of there, which that's a whole other commentary. And you're sitting in your chair, going, and so I think it sets up these power structures where kids are like, oh, I'm down here on the power structure, therefore I must do these things, therefore um um I should do what adults say, kind of carte blanche. And unschooling kids don't wind up there because they're just not in the daily grind of, this is a place you're locked in, this is a person in charge, you do what they say. And I grew up, and probably still am, incredibly anti-authoritarian. And so that's kind of what I see, that's like this huge difference, is because I see like unschooling and even homeschooling kids in general are just like, I'm going over there. And people will even ask me, they'll be like, wow, those kids are incredibly independent. And it's like, well, I guess they are, but really it's just they don't know that they're attached to, really attached, or yeah, they are. There's going to be times when I'm like, hey, we're all going to get hit by a car or whatever, so we're doing this thing now. But they have so much less of a, I'm attached to that authority figure, and have to think about it 5 times before I go, and just go. And so yeah. I think these I am the one that came up with the title of oppression, but these authority structures, they're doing things that we maybe don't realize that they're doing, that then people have to overcome, when they get out.
I think we're seeing evidence that there's a lot of people that never leave it, and so they perpetuate that cycle. And I think that's the situation I was in. So even though I was out of the school system, I was in still what we would call like a schoolish mindset, where I believed either that age equaled, wisdom and understanding. And I assumed that just because I was older than someone, that I was more mature than them, that I was more knowledgeable than them, that I was more capable. And if people don't stay open to the idea that someone who's younger than you can be better at a lot of different things than you are, then that's a road to bitterness. That's a road of bitterness, I think. So I see a lot of evidence that there's people that still haven't found a way out of that system.
I think that gets ingrained. Well, I went to public school, so maybe that's how that got ingrained in me too. But I would find things. Got one kid that's an artist, and this wasn't really a me thing, but that kid can do things. I have no idea what she's doing, but they come out just wonderful, and she knows the techniques and the words and what's going on. And I'm just like, which I think is how, a lot of people in homeschooling are like, well, how will you teach them everything? And it's like, you won't. But they're perfectly capable. We set her up with classes and found scholarships where she could. And then, I did this other thing that was even worse, where we were out hiking. And the littlest kid, let's see, who would have been 5, I was like, I saw an arrow. I'm like, oh, that's, I pulled the adultism bullshit. I'm like, oh, that's adorable. You saw it. Oh, that's really good. And the middle kid's like, I'll be back, and wandered off, and we're all sitting there on the hill watching the countryside. And then the little kid wanders off, and I see him down there somewhere, I think. And after a while, they both came back, and they're holding, like a hunting, like arrow, like razor arrow for hunting. And they're like, this is the arrow we found. And I'm just like, oh, no shit. You can do things. You're also adorable, but you can do, and when you say something, it's real, and you're not unskilled and unreliable, and kind of all the things that I had been programmed to think, little kids, adorable, unreliable, but adorable. No.
We're kind of talking about like why kids kind of push back against the system. And, if we take away the things for them to push back on, then I think that we would, which I think is what unschooling is about, then we allow them to become more like the people they want to be, because they're not expending any energy pushing back on us. They're just doing the things that they want to do.
Yeah. No, I saw a meme and I can't, it was Zach Weiner. And I can't remember it. He does a funny web funny called SMBC. But the other day that he's like, the reason new hires are like 24-year-olds are so much more productive than 54-year-olds is because they don't have this 3 decades of accumulated, disgruntlement, or they're constantly thinking about all the ways they've been disgruntled for the last 30 years, and they just can sit down and do the work. And it's kind of like that.
Yes. You're so optimistic when you're that young. It's like, get out of here with all your positivity, your optimism. We don't need it here. Sell crazy. What was that line from As Good as It Gets? Sell crazy somewhere else. We're all stocked up here.
Right.
I'm full of too many pop culture quotes. It keeps it fun though. I think what you're highlighting a little bit, and I've noticed this in other work. So if we go back to Mr. Wolf's class, the importance of some of these books is that they are both a window and a mirror of our culture. So for the homeschooling kid, or for the homeschooling and unschooling family, literature gives us a window into the culture that we don't get to see as much. We get to see the school culture. And we read a series of books called Big Nate, which sounds very similar. Big Nate is like a lower middle school kid, and it kind of chronicles his life in school and around parents. But if you're also in school, it's sort of a mirror, and you can relate to those characters. So I think books like this serve a really important place in our culture. And I would imagine that there's a lot of teachers that dislike these books for that reason, because they feel uncomfortable. They feel uncomfortable with kids reading materials that might paint school in a negative light.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, I mean, it makes perfect sense and it's rational. I just never would have. That's wild.
I don't know anything about this book in particular, but like Big Nate definitely paints school as a place of frustration for a kid who doesn't like school that much, which Big Nate does not. He's an athlete and an artist, and school just grinds his gears to no end, and he doesn't get along with the teachers, and he's kind of just a disengaged, sort of a troublemaker, kind of a what was it, a little bit of a class clown.
Okay.
And so we get to have conversations around Big Nate at the kitchen table, which is very interesting because it gives us opportunities to talk about what school would be like. And you might have seen this on Twitter, but the kids actually requested that their mom act like one of the teachers in the book. And
I did see that.
Detention.
Yeah. How's that going?
They wanted to role play that a little bit. They've had fun with it, and we've played along with it. And so we've tried to she's tried to talk to them about, okay, how are you going to know when I'm pretending to be this teacher and when I'm just mom? Because normally when you show me a drawing or something you're working on, I look at it and I just say, oh, I like that, or oh, I liked how you did this. But when I'm pretending to be this teacher, you want me to criticize it and say that it's not good enough and send you to detention.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
So we have our library set up. We call it our library. There's just a bunch of games in there and stuff. I don't want to make it seem like we live in this huge house. We just call it our library. There's hardly anything in there. So that's a separate room. So when they go to detention, they have to go in there. And then one of them acts like the hall monitor,
Okay, I remember those.
And
Yeah, yeah.
they have to keep the other kid in detention. So then they sort of play this game of cat and mouse of like they escape detention and the other one's got to drag them back.
That's awesome.
So they role play all this. Now this kind of reminds me of something that was very unsettling from did you read Free to Learn by Peter Gray?
Yeah, a long time
Yeah.
ago, but yeah.
So he talked about how there's accounts of the kids playing, the kids in the concentration camps playing out the roles that they saw in the camps.
Oh gosh.
Do
Okay.
you remember that? So
No.
there would be kids who were in prison with their families, and they were pretending to be Nazi soldiers and Jewish prisoners, and they would play out those roles just the way that they saw them being played out in the concentration camp.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Which was really um, it was just really hard to imagine. You know, it's a sensitive topic. I don't really know a lot about it, but it's just, and I can't really remember what Peter Gray was saying about it, but to me it illustrated that play serves this really important place in our lives where it's like a processing mechanism that we have. It's like if we want to understand something, we have to like play it out a little bit.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think is pretty fascinating.
Pretend and experience. Well, I mean, they were experiencing it, but yeah, yeah. Experience all the aspects. Wow. Wow.
And I wonder if there were parents in the concentration camps that observed this going on and tried to shut it down, and if there were parents that saw it and saw that it was and felt like, no, that's a good thing, that's important that they actually like process this. That's what I got really interested in. I haven't found anything on it, but if I remember right, that was chapter 10 if you want to
Okay.
reread it.
Yeah.
I think it was the chapter on social and emotional play that he brought up that part.
Got it. Got it. Wow. Huh. Huh. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's the thing.
Did we go deep enough for you today, Hamilton?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. We did.
You're like, I just really wanted to talk about this graphic novel, and you ended up bringing up concentration camps. Thank you.
Oh, I'm trying to think if I can even think of what the kids here. I'm not around them a lot when they play. And I'm not sure what they do. Like I said, they plot trips to Maine. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, is there
Yeah.
anything that you feel like anything that you want to say to kind of close out this topic for today? I really enjoyed exploring this with you, as I always do.
I would say one thing on the other side of it is I think we and I talked about it a lot. Talked about the traditional school has these structures and these strictures and I thought it was a bummer when I was a kid and actually one of the kids here tried first grade and after about 4 weeks decided that no. But at the same time, just kind of a qualifier. I think public schools are like really, really important for the society we have right now. I think if everybody was able to figure out how they could walk out, that would be phenomenal. But at the same time, they're really providing something that we really, really, really need, and I'm glad they're there. So when I talk about these things, I'm definitely talking about, I think the system is wonky and unfortunate. But the folks that are doing it, actually, yeah, I think because I know some of them are really nice folks. And they're working in a system and yeah, I wish the system was better, but also it's super important that we have it and that it's really nice that we do. So.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought to leave with. And I think I can speak for Hamilton here too, that if you're watching and you have ideas about school and oppression and racism and ageism, all of those things, like, we don't feel like we have any of the answers. Like,
Yeah.
and we love learning from other families. We're just trying to speak from our perspectives, speak about things that we've experienced. And so, leave a comment and, introduce yourself to us. We would love to read any of those thoughts and entertain questions for future topics.
Oh yeah, no, that would be great.
But I think I totally agree with you, Hamilton, that I see the importance of having this place where kids can go that they feel safe. And what we end up railing against is the fact that so many kids don't feel safe at school. They don't feel comfortable with their relationships with their teachers, with their peers, with the people who are, handing out, rules in the schools. So that's what we're trying to push back against and talk about. And we can speak about that because we went to public school, so we know
Yeah.
how we experienced it, even though that's not the same as everybody.
Yeah.
So thank you to the viewer
Yeah.
for
Thanks,
watching,
everybody.
and we will see you in the next video.
Cool. Bye, everybody.